Hi, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Tom.
Hi, I'm Stephanie.
And it's our TOEIC unit for this particular period of time, and we're going to be talking about a particular disease that's going around, especially in the summer. And I've heard about this over the years, and this is always a concern. It's something called dengue fever. I think you say dengue in Chinese, which is basically straight from the English dengue fever.
Right. And we're going to talk about what some of the signs or symptoms are and how you might avoid getting it in the first place. You don't want to get it. We're going to go through and read through today's article. I'll be the doctor today, and Mr. Tom will be Matthew, and then we'll be back. Good morning. What brings you in today?
Good morning, Dr. Landon. I've been feeling really unwell for the past few days. I have a high fever, severe headaches, and muscle pains.
Any signs of a rash or stomach discomfort?
Yes, I've noticed some spots on my skin, and my stomach's been upset with some vomiting.
Have you traveled anywhere recently?
Actually, I went on a trip to the south of Taiwan last week. We spent quite a bit of time outdoors.
That's important information. Given your symptoms and recent travel history, I suspect you might have contracted dengue fever. It's prevalent in some southern regions, especially during the warmer months.
Dengue fever? I thought it was merely a bad case of the flu.
That's a common mistake. However, dengue has more specific symptoms, like those you're experiencing. We'll need to conduct some blood tests to confirm the diagnosis. Catching it early is vital for effective management of the symptoms. Moreover, it's essential to closely monitor your condition, as dengue can lead to severe complications in some cases.
I see. What's the next step?
I'll have the nurse come in to administer the blood test. Then, I'll prescribe medication to relieve the fever and pain. We'll schedule a follow-up appointment to review your test results and evaluate your recovery process.
Thank you, Dr. Landon. I appreciate your help. Okay, everybody, it's time for us to discuss the contents of today's conversation, which is between Dr. Landon and Matthew. And Matthew has gone to see the doctor because he's not feeling well. And the doctor here begins the conversation. She says, "Good morning. What brings you in today?" In other words, why are you here? How are you feeling today? What can I do for you?
Right. And we'll often use that expression, what brings you here? So get ready for that in case you haven't learned it. It's just another way to say, how can I help you? What's your problem that you've made an appointment to see me for? He's got a medical mystery. A mystery is something that you haven't figured out. Maybe you don't have enough information yet. Oh, it's a mystery to me. So he's got a medical mystery. He probably thinks he just has a typical stomach flu, although he has a rash, which we're going to find out about. And usually if you have the stomach flu, which I had a couple of months ago, you don't have a rash at the same time. So let's go ahead and see what Matthew is suffering from.
Yep, that's a very catchy title, Matthew's Medical Mystery. And yes, we're going to find out what he's suffering from or what his mystery disease is. And again, he describes his situation to the doctor. "Good morning, Dr. Landon. I've been feeling really unwell for the past few days. I haven't felt good. I haven't felt well for the past few days. And I've decided to come in to talk to you today."
Sure.
And here he gives her his symptoms. "I have a high fever, severe headaches, and muscle pains." So your fever, of course, is when you get hot and you test your fever by taking your temperature. When I was a kid and had a fever, my mom put her, her cheek up to my forehead to feel if I was hot or something like that. "Do you have a fever?" "Well, you're not hot. You don't have a fever." But in this case, he has a fever. He's also got headaches that are severe. They're strong, and they're so strong that maybe he can't concentrate on his work or at school or whatever. And another symptom that he has is muscle pains. He's got pains in his muscles when he moves or something. They hurt.
Yeah, so if you have a severe headache, on a scale from 1 to 10, it might be a 7 to a 10. That's not very fun. I wanted to mention here you could also say and muscle pain. Pain being a non-count noun, you could use it like that as well. Muscle pains is great as well. So Dr. Landon says, any signs of a rash or stomach discomfort. So he hasn't mentioned these things, right? So she is asking for more information. If you have a sign of something, you have some sort of, symptom, some sort of something that's telling you, that's trying to communicate to you something, a sign. So a rash, of course, is something I mentioned earlier. A rash kind of looks like just little red bumps or red color over your skin. It doesn't have to actually be a bump, although sometimes it is, most of the time. And stomach discomfort, meaning, you kind of feel like you want to throw up or vomit. We're going to get to that word in a minute. So she's asking him about some symptoms or signs that he had not mentioned earlier.
Right. You could say that he feels nauseous or he has an upset stomach. At least that's what the doctor is asking him. And he says, yes, I've noticed some spots on my skin, which is a definition of rash. You'll have spots on your skin. My wife gets rashes all the time. I think she's allergic to something.
Oh, yeah.
She's had these rashes for many years. We haven't really figured out exactly why she has these rashes.
Do they itch?
Yes, indeed, they do itch. So, yeah, it's not a very good situation for her. But yes, a rash will include spots on your skin, or it will look in different ways depending on the person. And he does say that his stomach's been upset with some vomiting. So he has an upset stomach. I guess you could say he's got a stomach ache, and he's had some vomiting. He has thrown up. So here the verb is to vomit, which means something inside you comes out your mouth because you feel bad. You might vomit if you've been drinking too much, or if you've had some food that has bacteria or in it or something like that. You might vomit. And vomiting is a more formal term. The more colloquial form that we have is to throw up. Oh, I threw up all day yesterday. I must have something wrong with my stomach.
I think whether you choose to use throw up, a verb phrase, or vomit, sometimes depends on the family you grew up in. It also could depend on the area of the country or even the world. Maybe you grew up in England or the UK and they tend to say vomit more than throw up. I grew up with throw up. And so when I hear vomit, I think more of what a doctor would say to me. But really, it just depends on how you grew up, what your background is, on which one you use. They're both great, and we understand either way. So you can use either phrase to throw up or to vomit. We did most of our vomiting or throwing up when we were kids. Usually you don't throw up so much as you get to be an adult. But like I mentioned, I had the stomach flu a couple of months ago. I hadn't thrown up probably in years. So it was weird. I thought it was after the earthquake, I was just feeling kind of, nauseous, where you feel your stomach's unsettled. Turned out I really did have the stomach flu. But anyway, and now I know. So he goes to the doctor and just wants to know, hey, why am I feeling unwell? So after he finishes explaining some of his symptoms, and she asks him a couple of more questions, she asks an important question. We're going to find out why. She says, have you traveled anywhere recently? And he says, I went on a trip to the south of Taiwan last week. He could also have said, I went down to southern Taiwan last week, and we spent quite a bit of time outdoors.
Okay, so that's where he went, and of course the doctor is trying to figure out exactly where he's been. Maybe he has had some contact with a virus or with some bacteria or something like that. And Dr. Lannon says, that's important information. That's very useful. It's a good thing that you told me that. Given your symptoms, or considering your symptoms, and given your recent travel history, or considering the fact that you traveled recently, I suspect you might have contracted dengue fever. So yes, she has listened to his description of his symptoms, and she has also considered the fact that he traveled to southern Taiwan recently, and she's kind of made a conclusion here. Well, I really think, I'm not 100% sure, no one really is, but I suspect you might have dengue fever, which again is dengue in Chinese. And dengue fever, of course, I guess it's not horrible, but it makes you uncomfortable for a while. And it's carried by mosquitoes. I think they carry this virus around. And if you get bitten by that mosquito, you're in trouble.
I think people were afraid of it a couple of years back, at least in the United States and Florida in particular, that has similar swampy water that Taiwan has because they have a lot of rain. People were worried about it because if you got pregnant or you were pregnant and then a mosquito bit you, it could harm your little unborn baby. So it's more dangerous, I think, for pregnant women. So watch out there. But yeah, you don't really know for sure what you have until you do some tests. We also say in English, I want to run some tests. It doesn't mean you're actually 跑步. It means you're actually just doing some tests to see what the doctor can find out about you, whether it's an x-ray or a blood test or some other test. There are lots of tests these days they can run on you. So she wants to do some of these tests first. So he doesn't know too much about dengue fever, or as I was listening to different pronunciations of this word, you could also say dungy or dunga. There are so many different ways. So be prepared. You might hear a really strange pronunciation of it. He thought, oh, what are you talking about, doctor? I just thought I merely had a bad case of the flu, or it was merely a bad case. Merely just means just not important or only. It was just that. It wasn't a big deal.
Exactly. So, yes, he thought it was only a bad case of the flu and that it should be okay. Just give me some medicine and I'll be on my way. But this sounds more serious, and the doctor says, well, that's a common mistake. People come to the wrong conclusion based on those symptoms. They do need to go into the doctor to make sure that they do have just a flu or just the flu. And in this case, though, he has made the wise decision and he has gone to see the doctor, and she has determined through her diagnosis, which we'll come up to in just a couple of seconds here, she has determined that he probably has dengue fever. So she says, however, dengue has more specific symptoms than the ones you have described. Yes, he has been experiencing these symptoms, but there are more symptoms. And, of course, you'll need to conduct further tests to find out if he has this disease and what his other indications are. She says, we'll need to conduct some blood tests to confirm the diagnosis. So that's what a doctor does. The doctor gives you a diagnosis. The doctor looks you over, listens to your description, maybe checks your pulse, listens to your heartbeat, checks your breathing, and then comes to a conclusion. So that whole process is called her diagnosis.
Right. Well, we're talking about common illnesses. I wanted to mention some weird things in English grammar. We say, I have a cold. We don't say, I have cold. And we say, I have the flu. We don't know why, weird. But it's weird. But you just have to learn that. You can't say, I have a flu. You have the flu. There are different kinds, but that's what we do in English. So I have the flu. I have a fever. We don't say, I have fever. I have a fever. We don't say, I have the fever. So a cold, the flu, a fever. Sorry about that. It's kind of weird. So yeah, that doctor's going to run some tests and to kind of figure out what's going on. I don't know if we mentioned this earlier. We have this word prevalent in where Dr. Landon's talking earlier about he perhaps has contracted this dengue fever. If it's prevalent, it just means it's found in a lot of places. It's widespread. It's something that's pretty common. But it has to be where a place has pretty cold temperature or pretty warm temperatures and a lot of water. So if you live in a desert like I do, or at least I grew up in a desert, we're not going to have any dengue fever, but it's also going to be hot and dry.
Right. Again, as you said, prevalent means it's widespread. For example, I could say cold days are prevalent if you live in Minnesota during the winter. So yeah, it can be quite cold there. Cold days are prevalent, or snow is prevalent. You see it all the time if you're in some place really far north, like Minnesota or Canada or whatever.
Yeah.
But again, she wants to conduct some blood tests to confirm her diagnosis, and catching it early is vital for effective management of the symptoms. So yes, you have to catch it early, because if you catch it late, then you'll probably be in more trouble and you might suffer more as a result. I suppose you might even die if you don't get the proper diagnosis on time. That's true of rabies. If you don't get a diagnosis soon enough, you're a goner.
I've never heard of anyone dying, but it could happen. What if you're very elderly? We don't know. Those things kind of combine together, but yeah, so they want to take care of it early. I think they feel that way about all illnesses. We want to catch it early or diagnose it early. If something's vital, it's essential. And they want to manage your symptoms. I'd love to go to a doctor one day and have the doctor say, we want to cure you of the disease. But usually it's just, it's called pain management or symptoms management with some drugs they give you. When are they going to say, hey, let's cure this? You never have to come back and see me again. Well, it's essential to closely monitor. If you monitor something, you follow it, you watch it. For example, if you're a parent and your little one has a fever, you want to closely monitor them to see if it gets worse and you need to take them to see a doctor. So dengue, she's saying here, can lead to severe complications. A complication, let's talk about what it means when you're talking about medical issues first. Just means it's another problem you get because of something that you're already suffering from. A complication from a cold might be you get bronchitis, which means now you have bad lungs, so it gets even worse. Or maybe you have to have surgery and there were complications, meaning they were just going to fix one thing and then because something went wrong during the operation, and it may not have been the doctor, it might just be your body responding poorly to something. Now you have more issues or problems to solve. That's what a complication means in the medical world.
This reminds me of the country singer Waylon Jennings. If you know him, he died of complications from diabetes. So he had diabetes, but he died from complications, which were things that happened as a result of diabetes. He probably had some heart problems, kidney failure, stuff like that. So those are complications due to some other disease. And yes, having dengue fever could lead to complications in some cases if you don't catch it early and if you don't monitor your condition. Matthew has another question. What's the next step? What do I do next? And the doctor said, well, I'll have the nurse come in to administer the blood test. So he needs to have a blood test, maybe a urine test later, but he's going to have a blood test. And if somebody conducts a blood test, well, they administer it. They go through the procedures to do the blood test. So I guess they stick a needle in your arm and extract a sample and label it and then send it off to the lab.
And then the doctor will prescribe medication, meaning she'll write up on a slip of paper or type into her computer, giving somebody the authorization to give you some medicine or medication. You can use either word. Medicine, medication, they're both the same. To relieve the fever and pain, to help the fever go down and the pain to be reduced. We'll schedule a follow-up appointment. Appointment means you have a set time to go and do something, maybe see a doctor, or maybe you have an appointment to go see a lawyer. It could be anybody. Follow-up here is taking a verb phrase, putting a hyphen in the middle, and turning it into an adjective in front of that noun, appointment. And then she's going to review the test results and evaluate someone's recovery process. What does that mean, Tom?
Well, if you evaluate something, you just take a look at the situation, all the information, and you come to some conclusions. You evaluate. In this case, they're going to evaluate his recovery process. A recovery, of course, is when you recover from a disease, you get better and return to normal. I did want to mention that the word appointment is what you have if you see a doctor or a dentist. If you're going out with a girl or a boy to see a movie, that's a date. And if you get together with somebody to conduct business, that is a meeting. So here Matthew says, thank you, Dr. Landon. I appreciate your help. And hopefully he'll get better soon. Okay,
hopefully, yeah.
That brings us to the end of our explanation for today. Here comes our Chinese teacher who does not have dengue fever.
听众朋友大家好，我是安娜。我们今天多益单元带大家看一下，有点类似感冒的到底是什么样的一个情况。我们要介绍一个，其实还在这个东南亚或者是台湾南部，有时候还是会有这种 case， 就是登革热啦。 登革热一开始好像感冒，甚至现在有很多流感的症状。所以今天呢，我们的主角是 Matthew， 他去看医生了。这个 Dr. Landon 兰登医生啊，就要帮他做一个诊断，很专业哦。不过啊，今天这个多益的对话当中，其实可以大概切成3个段落。在第一个跟第二个 Dr. Landon 跟 Matthew 的对话当中，我们谈的是一个症状。那有了症状的表达之后，看医生，医生就会问诊啊，可能你有去过哪些地方啊？这个症状有多久啊？类似这样的问诊。那最后呢，就会有一个诊断，或者是接下来要安排的一些检查。这个对话呢，大致上是这样的结构。所以我们接下来就看一下第一个跟第二个 Dr. Landon 跟 Matthew 他们的对话。在对话当中，当然一开始医生一定会问说你哪里不舒服啊？所以 Matthew 他有特别提到他有哪些症状呢？我们在这里可以特别看一下，如果你有不舒服，常见不舒服的症状，英文大概怎么说？比如说在第一个 Matthew 这个地方，他说发高烧哦，然后头好痛哦，然后肌肉也酸痛。这个 fever F-E-V-E-R 就出现在第一个 Matthew 的第3句这边。好，而且是发高烧哦，这高真的就是英文的 high fever。 I have a high fever。 那头痛我们说过啊，如果是比较属于广泛的范围，然后指不出一个点的那种痛，会叫做 ache A-C-H-E， 所以头痛叫做 headache 嘛。那如果说胃痛 stomachache S-T-O-M-A-C-H-A-C-H-E， 这个是 stomachache， 就是胃痛啦。然后我们常常就是在感冒的时候，有时候会肌肉酸痛，有没有？突然的怎么觉得好累哦，头痛肌肉酸痛，好像通常感觉是流感。那肌肉酸痛呢，基本上就是说 muscle pains。 可是如果我们真的感冒的时候，常常也会喉咙痛嘛，我们喉咙痛就会说 sore throat， 那个喉咙痛的痛是那种酸痛的意思， S-O-R-E I have a sore throat。 那喉咙 T-H-R-O-A-T sore throat， 大概这种感冒的症状是这样。不过这个医生还蛮专业哦，在第二个 Dr. Landon 这个地方，他除了说他发现这个好像感觉是流感，有没有一些其他的症状呢？例如有没有像长疹子啦，这里提到的 rash R-A-S-H， 或者是胃不舒服，因为不晓得到底是怎么样的痛，是隐隐的痛还是绞痛，有没有拉肚子之类的，所以医生会直接用 discomfort， 就是不舒服这个单字。好，那有时候疹子会痒嘛，痒那个英文叫做 itchy I-T-C-H-Y itchy。 然后有时候我们可能真的会拉肚子或者是什么的，那拉肚子的英文就叫做 diarrhea D-I-A-R-R-H-E-A diarrhea。 好，那把症状讲完之后呢，我们就来看一下症状讲了之后呢，医生就可能还会再询问一些他觉得必要问的东西。所以从第3个跟第4个 Dr. Landon 跟 Matthew 的这个对话当中，我们就可以看一下 Dr. Landon 直接问他说你最近有没有去哪里？不晓得要怀疑什么对，这个我感冒跟去哪里有什么关系？其实是有关系的，因为我们知道如果医生开始怀疑你可能不是单纯的流感，可能是登革热的时候，跟你的旅游史就会有很大的关系了。那在这里我们就特别来复习一下这个时态的部分。因为 Dr. Landon 在第3个 Dr. Landon 他们问说你最近有没有去哪里呀？这个最近的 recently 就包含了一直到现在为止跟前面的某一个时间点，比如说1个礼拜之前到现在，或几个礼拜之前到现在。假设时间是一段时间到现在，那么就会搭配现在完成式。现在完成式它是现在式哦，只不过它要谈的时间是一段到现在的时间，所以最近有没有去过哪里，一定要用现在完成式。你最近曾经去过哪里吗？ Have you traveled anywhere recently？ 好， Matthew 回答说对啊，我上礼拜有去台湾南部啊。好，假设是特定的事件，在过去的特定的点，你看在 Matthew 第3个 Matthew 第1句的地方出现了 last week， 对，我上礼拜有去台湾南部啊，所以上礼拜做了这一个特定的动作，就直接用简单过去式 I went on a trip， 这里就用 went。要不然我上礼拜去台湾南部，不就是我最近发生的事吗？可是你要看啊，英文的句子就是有时候要看它那个时间，它动词就是会有时态的不同。所以如果是过去特定的一个时间，简单过去式；如果是最近，包含现在，可能曾经，或者是表示经验，或者是有没有如何，这个都会用现在完成式来表态。好，那接着我们就来看一下第4个 Dr. Landon。Dr. Landon 这边就讲说，哇哦，如果是这样子的话，你曾经去台湾的南部，有可能是有登革热哦，就要做一些检查啦。我们在这里看一下第2句 ，Given your symptoms。Given 这个字就特别把它抓出来。那这个字呢，其实现在也越来越常用了哦。不过我觉得在文章当中比较常看到，基本上就不是字面上什么给予的意思了，就把它当成个介系词，就有考量、有表原因的意思。因为你的症状你这样讲，我有考量到你的 symptoms， 你这么说，还有你最近的 travel history， 我会怀疑你得的是 dengue fever。所以接着 Matthew 就会很惊讶啦，什么？我以为是得流感呢。当然流感本身就很严重，但登革热听说啦，就是登革热这症状其实有时候比流感还要更严重诶。如果我们说啊，我这次感冒很严重，常会讲说 I have a bad cold。那其实流感很严重，你也可以说 I have the bad flu， 或者是我们现在把它讲正式一点，我们看第4个 Matthew 最后面 a bad case of the flu， 严重的流感。好，那如果是这样的话，接下来就要去评估啦，做一些检查。比如说哪些检查呢？我们来看一下第5个 Dr. Landon 这边第3句，要抽血检查就可以知道是不是得登革热咯。抽血检查叫做 blood test， blood test， 这样才能够正确的诊断。同样这句话最后面一个字的诊断，我们现在看到是名词 diagnosis。 好，那接着呢，最后我们来看一下，那到最后在第6个 Dr. Landon 的地方，当然除了这个抽血检查之外，现在要先缓解一下症状嘛，所以一定会开一些药。那开药的这个开啊，第6个 Dr. Landon 特别注意这个动词，在第2句 prescribe， P-R-E-S-C-R-I-B-E prescribe， 它跟我们常常背的另外一个字 describe 描述 D-E-S-C-R-I-B-E 长很像哦。这个 prescribe 很重要，因为它的名词 prescription P-R-E-S-C-R-I-P-T-I-O-N prescription 就是我们现在看医生会拿到一个处方签，然后再去药局领药，有没有？这个也是很常用的，所以这边要特别记起来。所以希望呢 Matthew 得的不是登革热啊，是一般的感冒或者是流感也没关系，因为登革热真的很严重。但是我们明天还要带大家来看一下，如果真的要防治登革热的话，会有哪些方法？如果我要喷药的话，注意什么事项哦？我是安娜，我们明天见。
We're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Okay, guys, now we're back to talk for a few minutes about useful expressions. These particular expressions are about your concern. Maybe you're anxious or worried about something. Number 1 is, I'm concerned about the upcoming test because I haven't had much time to study. So someone's worried here because they've been very busy. Maybe they're working a part-time job and they haven't had much time to study. So you can say, I'm concerned about, I'm worried about, I'm a little anxious about the upcoming test. All of those things work.
Right, so that's if you're expressing concern. You could also say something has been on your mind all day. Our example sentence here says, Did we make the right choice to postpone the event? It's been on my mind all day. What do you think? So if something's on your mind, that means you're thinking about it all the time. You could say this about your crush, the person you like. Oh,
yeah.
You've been on my mind all day. Or I think there's a Willie Nelson song, You are always on my mind, which means I'm always thinking about you.
Yeah, or you could say, I can't get it out of my mind. I can't get it out of my head. It's just this thought that just keeps going through your head again and again. Number 3 is we do have some doubts that the current budget will cover all the planned expenses. If you have some doubts about something, you're not quite sure, okay? So we have some concerns that the current budget will cover all of the planned expenses. We have some worries. We're not quite sure. There are lots of ways you can phrase this, but we do have some doubts. Sounds better than we just don't think that current budget's going to do it, you know? So sometimes you can just soften up the way that you communicate by using some of these useful expressions we like to give you every month with TOEIC.
Exactly. These are some ways that you can express your concern, that you're worried about something, something's been on your mind, or you have doubts about something, etc., etc. Now, here's our discussion questions for today, or at least it's one in two parts. The first part of it is, how would you feel if you were in Matthew's situation? And what questions would you have for the doctor?
Well, if you're not sure what is making you ill, it's always kind of scary. It's a time of uncertainty and worry, you might say. His symptoms are pretty typical, I would say, except for when you combine them together, I would be a little concerned. Muscle pain with a high fever, but a rash. Yeah, and he's throwing up. So, yeah, it's kind of weird. For me, I would probably go and check because if I was throwing up and I had a rash and the other things that sound more like, you know, you have the flu, I would go and find out for sure. But what I would ask the doctor is, how do I cure this? I don't want all of these drugs you want to give me. How do I get rid of it forever? That would be my question. Now, what would you do in his situation, Tom?
Well, I would be concerned that it has something to do with COVID. COVID, of course, is not really something that people are worried about too much, but I guess it's still out there in some form. So I would probably think, hey, is this related to COVID? You know, I had COVID before.
Not throwing up,
yeah, but it might, I don't know, I suppose have something to do with it. So I would ask, and the doctor would probably say, oh, don't worry about it. It has nothing to do with it. And that's one question I would have. And the second part of our discussion here is, what questions would you have for the doctor? Which is basically what we've been discussing. Yes, does this have something to do with COVID? Or do I have a history of this? Would that be important? I had the chicken pox when I was a kid.
Or do I have cancer? Some people really worry and really, you know, make themselves really ill because they get so worried about stuff. So, yeah.
Right, or to ask him, is this just all in my mind? Am I pretending that I'm sick? Maybe it's something psychological. That might be another question I would ask the doctor. Think about this question yourself and have a discussion amongst yourselves. And that brings us to the end of our lesson for today. Remember to check out our content on Facebook and YouTube. We certainly wish you can improve your English by studying with us. From all of us here at English Digest, my name is Tom.
And I'm Stephanie.
Goodbye.
See you next time.